What are the 4 attachment styles?
Secure attachment, anxious ambivalent, anxious avoidant, and disorganized. A safe attachment is a secure attachment between a parent and their kid, or caregiver and the kid, that leads the kid to have self-confidence, self-efficacy, agency, and more healthy relationship. An anxious style of attachment is an insecure type of attachment where a kid needs were not met by a parent or a caregiver, and as a result, the kid will have an intense fear of rejection in relationships. In the avoidant attachment style is another insecure one, and happens when the kid's needs are not met by the parent and can lead the future adult to avoid emotions and avoid having difficult conversation with loved ones. And the last insecure style of attachment is the disorganized, and it's a mix of the anxious one and the avoidant one. Yeah, I'm Silvia. I'm a psychologist in training, which means I haven't finished yet my degree, but I'm working towards that. I'm Italian. I moved to Australia 9 years ago, and I'm really interested into child development, and specifically how parents and caregivers influence and shape the life of our future kids or that becomes adults, and how they relate to other human beings, I guess.
And what motivated your interest in psychology at the beginning?
Oh, that's a good question. I think a bit of my family history. I've always been curious about how and why people behave in certain ways. And I think, seeing some patterns in myself that I did not particularly like or were proud of.
What age did you start to notice these patterns?
Probably my early 20s. So probably around 21, 22. And then I got married, and that came up in the relationship.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it was a good wake-up call.
Would you be comfortable sharing one of those patterns that you noticed?
Sure. So, making it brief and easy to understand, I was very anxious that my partner would leave at the beginning of the relationship because of my anxiety or whatever.
After you got married?
After I got married. Even before, but even after. And I think that was a pattern that it was transmitted through by my mother and my family. So I think that was a good one to work through.
How did that manifest?
Just with constantly worry. At the beginning of the relationship was I don't think is going to stay with me, so I'm just gonna be avoidant. So I wouldn't really commit to the relationship in emotional level. I was always loyal and honest.
Trying to sort of protect your ego.
Yeah. Just not really. He would say, "Oh, we could move in together," and I was like, "Yeah, whatever," not really committed. But yeah, I guess.
Is there a simple way you could express the attachment models?
I can try. Yeah. I think it's easy to understand that attachment first is an evolutionary trait humans have. So it's an emotional attachment to caregivers. So when a baby is born, it tends to attach to the people that feed them or feed her, or they give them safety or emotional support and comfort. And it can be anybody. It doesn't have to be the parents. Usually it's the parents, but it can be any caregiver. And what happens is Bowlby was the first one coming up with this theory, and then his students and future researchers kind of developed up onto this theory. So his idea was that was an evolutionary trait, and then his students create this experiment, which I think is the easiest one to that helps to understand what attachment theory means and what are the styles. So in the experiment, there was a mother and a baby could not talk yet, so could not express the needs, but could crawl, so was able to move.
Was this in the 70s?
Yeah, it was the
60s?
late 20th century.
Okay, yeah.
And basically, they just observed the interaction between mom and baby in another room. The experimenter were hiding in another room. And they saw that there was a bunch of toys on the floor in this room, and the baby and the mom were there first alone. And the baby will play with the toys, and with the mom encouragement, it would just explore around the room. And after a while, a stranger that the baby didn't know comes in the room, and they observe what the baby did. And after a while, they let the mom leave the room, and the baby stays with the stranger and observe what the baby did. And then the mom comes back, and they see what happens, and then both the mom and the stranger leaves, and the baby's alone, and then the mom comes back. So they study all these. They observe all the reactions of the baby.
So can I just clarify? So it's mum and baby.
Yeah.
Mum leaves. Stranger comes in.
So it's mom and baby, then mom, baby, and stranger.
The stranger comes in. So there's three of them there.
Three of them. Then the mom leaves, so strangers and babies alone.
Okay.
And then the mom comes back.
Okay.
So it's three again. And then the mom and the strangers leave, and the baby's alone. And then the mom come back.
Okay, so it's baby, mum, stranger.
Yeah.
And then mum leaves, baby and stranger.
Yeah.
Mum comes back, it's all three of them.
Yeah.
And then both mum and stranger leave.
And then mom comes back.
Yeah. Okay. And what age were the children they were doing these experiments with?
I think 12 months old, just before they talk. So
okay,
I
sure.
think, 12 months.
And what were the findings of those experiments?
So it was really interesting because they saw that each baby had a different, because they did it with more babies, and each baby had a different type of reaction to when the mom came back, and how they dealt with their emotions. So most babies were crying or looked at the door when the mom were left, and they could not, they were distressed, let's say, when the mom left. And then that's here the reaction is what defined the attachment. So a secure attachment, which is what the majority of people have, it was defined as the mom leaves, the baby's really distressed, and the stranger cannot help the baby to calm down. But as soon as the mom comes back, the baby calms down and goes back to play with the toys. And if the mom was in the room, the baby was interacting with the stranger. But if the mom was not in the room, it wasn't. So that was defined as secure attachment. And then there was the anxious one, which basically the baby did not calm down when the mom came back. It couldn't go back to play. It was keep crying, and the mom couldn't calm it down.
So the interference of having alone time with a stranger meant that the child was continuously distressed even when the mother returned to comfort them.
Yes.
Okay.
So that was was called anxious ambivalent. And then we had the last one was anxious avoidant, which basically the baby wasn't as much. It wasn't really distressed when the mom left, and he kept playing with the toys. And when the mom came back, the baby acknowledged the mom was back, but wasn't really happy or didn't really go towards the mom. So that was called avoidant. There was a fourth type that was noticed a little bit less.
With the avoidant type, how was their reaction to the presence of a stranger? In those experiments, were they still distressed by this stranger?
No, so the baby was either ignored the stranger, or if he was going distressed because the mom left, it was able to be calmed down by the stranger.
Right, okay.
So, it was this.
Okay, so it didn't differentiate very well between stranger and caregiver.
Not that well, Or, there was this kind of not really caregiver if the mom was in the room or not.
Yeah, okay.
And then there was the last one that's called disorganized, and it was a small percentage of babies that showed that, and it was an inconsistent response. So while the other response, the baby did that all the time that they tested, the disorganized one will switch between the anxious one and the ambivalent one. And it's thought that that's due because they are scared of the caregiver. So if the baby is fearing the caregiver, might change the attachment response.
Putting aside the academic elements of these controlled experiments, obviously these are happening in a very contained and experimental space. How applicable are they to real life?
Well, that was the whole, I guess, it's a 50-50. Research shows they're quite applicable because they did a lot of longitudinal study. There is quite a few longitudinal study, which means studies that are done with people over time.
I think I saw one that was 32 years in the future.
Yeah.
That was even showing consistency with those early childhood.
Yeah. So there was another one, I think it was from Simpson, if I'm not wrong, but done in 2009. So it was a more recent one compared to the late 20th century, in which they follow kids from 12 months old until they became, I think, in their early 20s, so the first romantic relationships. And so how their type of attachment influenced and kind of predicted the way they behave and related with peers, teachers, and romantic partners.
Some people who are watching this might be worried that if they identify with one attachment model, it's kind of a life sentence. What do you think about that?
I don't think it's true. I mean, yes, it's good to see it perhaps and realize that our attachment to our caregivers, and they can, it can be easier if the caregivers you had when you're an infant is still alive. Obviously, if someone's caregiver passed away, it might be harder to see that type of attachment. But it's not, if you see it, you can probably work towards change if you don't like the patterns you're repeating in your life. And lots of people,
If we took one attachment style, let's say the anxious one, or anxious ambivalent.
That's.
How might that manifest in adult relationships?
Well, it could manifest in, for example, in a romantic partner by being anxious that the partner, not anxious that the partner is going to leave, but is extremely anxious that the partner might leave them, or if there is an argument, that the argument is going to cause a separation. It's harder for a person that had that attachment to, let's say, find their coping strategies a bit easier.
Apart from the secure attachment, are the other three attachment models considered insecure?
Yes. So that's what they're considered. So there is the secure one, and the other three are insecure. With particular, the fourth one, the disorganized, it's being believed to create more damage in the future relationships than the other two.
Before the interview, we're having a chat about some work you would like to do in the future, and that is working with parents before they actually have children but are planning a family. How would you aim to work with them?
Well, the actual framework still needs to be defined for me, the logistic. But the idea behind is I would like to help people that would like to become parents to learn about these things, about attachment theory, about different way of learning and modeling, and perhaps break the patterns that's been passed on by their parents to them, and give the kids the best chance for self-efficacy and confidence and future relationships.
Before we started the interview, you were talking about modeling from a child parent point of view. Can you explain what that term means?
Well, modeling in the way that kids really copy what parents do, even when parents don't think they are. So learning more about how learning is transmitted from an adult to a kid, it's probably going to help them to parent.
Yeah. Can you expand on that a little bit? So what do
Sure.
you mean by, because we're aware that children mirror adults, but is there some deeper?
Well, there is a big theory called social theory from Bandura, and in really short, you can teach kids directly. So by telling them, hey, don't touch the fire, it's hot, you're gonna burn yourself. They can learn by seeing you touching the fire and hurting yourself. They can learn by hearing about someone else that touched. So there is all these different type of learning that they're called like indirect, direct, basically.
Okay.
So yeah, have an idea of what that means, especially what attachment is. I think can help future parents to.
Definitely. In a lot of the literature, children are portrayed as passive recipients of care, and almost as if the attachment model is, bestowed on them by the parent. But isn't it possible that children are very active in this attachment relationship? And how would you work with children who are maybe found to have these insecure attachment types early in life?
So the children are definitely active. They're not passive, but it's also from the parents. So the children are active, but their worldview hasn't expanded as much as that one of an adult. So if a caregiver doesn't pay attention to the child needs immediately, the child doesn't think, my mom or dad are just busy working, or she's cooking, she can't pay attention to me. The children thinks mom or dad or my caregiver doesn't love me because it's not responding to my needs. So yes, you can work, the children is active, but you have to work in the environment and with the family first.
Okay, yeah.
Because the children can express itself.
Yeah, so you need to work with the matrix of all people involved in this.
When they're little, then obviously later in life you can work with them even as soon as they can talk.
I mean, I guess there's probably very strong contextual attachments because, many people grow up with, varying degrees of attachment to their siblings, to their cousins, to their parents, to their grandparents. And I think one thing that struck me in doing some pre-reading for this interview is that it seemed to portray children as fitting into a singular container, and that will likely influence all of their attachments. But yeah, what do you think about... actually, that's not really a question. That's a statement.